Thank you. Now we will move forward with a panel discussion that will be moderated by Maria Laamanen from HELCOM and Andris Andrusaitis from BONUS.
Good afternoon. We will now start the panel discussion section of the conference. You can see the theme of our panel up here. We have altogether 7 esteemed guests with us, and we will discuss the future of the Baltic Sea and the Baltic Sea region in general. The aim will be to first highlight some megatrends and developments that are likely to take place in the region and have an impact on the Baltic Sea and its environment and the region overall. Then the panel will move on to discuss the needs for future research and especially taking into account these mentioned developments, the megatrends and future scenarios. And also what sort of research and science is supportive of decision making in the future. We will start the panel with a short introduction round of our panel guests, and then we will move on to the discussion. At a later stage during the panel, also the audience will be allowed to ask questions, and we really hope that you will pose questions. Andres, please.
Okay, so Mikael already told the names and affiliations of our distinguished panel members, but let us very quickly, and with some surprise questions, to go through the names and the origins of our panelists once again. Arnoldas Milukas, you are presented as the head of Unit I3 at DG Research. Could you explain us a little bit, or maybe to make it more figurative, your Unit I3, what was the most exciting thing it did in last month, for instance? I3, what it is? Sounds like M6.
No. Yeah, here, okay. Then the title of the unit is Management of Natural Resources, but it is a very broad area. Of course, I think maybe I will start, to think what the unit is not doing. We are not dealing with with the mineral resources, but in our remit. Of course, we have the whole issue on the biodiversity. So, let's say IPBS, Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So we deal with let's say, terrestrial, marine ecosystems. At the same time, in the unit, we have a sector which is called Earth Observation sector. Which is, let's say, European contribution to the group on Earth observation. I know if you know it, there's a very big activity where 88 countries are involved.
Now I think we
globally.
have to move to the next because we are really running out of the time, and we have 7 panelists.
Okay.
Frederick Wolf, you have been involved in Baltic Sea work for a very, very long time. 1-word, 2-word reply. What is the worst environmental problem we have in the Baltic?
The worst.
Worst. I think the worst is the one we don't know. There are unexpected changes that occur, which really scares me. Food web changes which we cannot explain.
Okay, but that's enough. We'll come back to that.
Jesper, you are now you've been working with different environmental consultancies quite long, but now you are finally settled at the academia. You are presented as a researcher or project leader at Danish National Environmental Institute, which is affiliated with the Aarhus University nowadays, and many of us, we know you as one of the author, may I say so, the chief authors behind several of those assessments, which actually we saw in your presentation as well, in particular the HOLAS, the Holistic Ecosystem Health Assessment. And still you said that in spite of all these red and yellow pictures, you said you are in love with the Baltic Sea. I love Mediterranean, for instance. Could you...
Me too.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, it happens. But yes, but I love only Mediterranean and Baltic is an ugly place. Have you 1-2 words to reconvince me? Why Baltic is so? What you find exciting in the Baltic?
I find it's compared to many other regional seas in Europe, it is extremely sensitive because of some of the gradients there and the brackish water.
Okay.
And I think, well, that is intriguing, and yeah, that's something that turns me on.
Okay, so you like enigmatic things and things you love. All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hermans, we just heard your presentation and very much about the impacts and inputs and outputs and so forth, but strategic intelligence, that is what you're involved in. Sounds very captivating, but really, what is the link to the Baltic Sea? Can you give more concrete examples?
The link to the Baltic Sea. Well, you know, we conduct and provide foresight analysis and foresight information services. So it's rather critical that we relate them to kind of even our physical surroundings. And I think that because Finland is part of the countries that are really neighboring Baltic Sea, then we have to realize that we have to kind of collaborate in managing the problems and tackling challenges regarding our physical environment. So that could be one interpretation.
Excellent.
Andrzej Cieslak. We all know you as a co-chair of the HELCOM Vasa Maritime Spatial Planning Working Group and a big expert in maritime spatial planning issues. But when somebody Googles with your name, we get that you are the chief specialist at Maritime Office in Gdynia. Could you, in a couple of words, explain what are you doing in this Maritime Office in Gdynia, a part of MSP, the Maritime Spatial Planning?
Well, besides sitting in an office, of course, I'm concerned with, among others, spatial planning on land and sea inside this office. So that's my main job, and then I get some things. If something unusual comes to the office, then it finally lands on my desk.
Right, thank you.
And now we jumped over Mrs. Anna-Stina Heiskanen from Finnish Environment Institute. You work with the Baltic Sea every day. It's one of your core areas of research and leading research activities in the Institute. What was your most stimulating moment at work during the recent month?
During the recent month? Well, I think that one of the stimulating issues is that when you get together with the scientists and you share the knowledge, you share the interesting ideas, what is there to be explored in the future. So those definitely are the things that sort of make you go and continue the research also in the future. And I think that the recent month has been full of such opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
And finally, Boris Chuborenko. I know you for many years. You come from city of Kaliningrad. and you are now a Deputy Director for Science of Oceanology Institute's Kaliningrad or Atlantic unit. But I also know that you've been leading for many years, and you are still leading the group, or what is Laboratory for Coastal Systems. And Kaliningrad is one place where the open sea meets the big lagoons, or these, as you say in Russian, limani, right? So intuitively, what you like, what coastal systems you like better? The open sea with the waves and dunes and sandy beaches, or these lagoons with maybe more reed and more freshwater fish and fishing opportunities? If you have a choice, where you spend your time?
If I have a choice, morning I'm spending at lagoon, and evening at the open sea, where I could see all sunset. From our Kaliningrad coast, it's very nice to see to Sweden, and instead of Sweden to see the sunset.
Okay, thank you very much, Boris.
All right, since we are a little bit running late in our time schedule.
But we have quite a long lunch break, so we still a bit of a lunchtime, distinguished audience. I hope it's fine.
Okay, so you prefer to hear about experiences of our panelists in the HELCOM-BONUS framework that was intended.
A very quick
If we get
round.
a couple of examples. We already heard some examples, but is there anybody who wants to reflect on some highlights or some experiences from which we could learn in work within HELCOM or BONUS frameworks?
Several of you have been involved actually in bonus projects, and Monika Stankiewicz mentioned in the beginning, I think 3 bonus projects were mentioned, distinguished for their contribution. But I know that you've been involved in several other projects as well, and maybe we can start a quick round of thinking about this with those. I understand, Boris, you have something to say.
Fortunately, I was involved in EcoSupport. In EcoSupport. EcoSupport was also mentioned already here, but for me it was opening to the climate questions. Because I'm working with lagoons, and lagoons, mostly all questions in lagoons concerned to time scale of today. What was yesterday, today, or tomorrow? And first time we tried to understand within the EcoSupport, it was a small task to understand what would be happened with our lagoon in the long future, in 100 years. So it was very interesting to me, and it was indoor to the climate questions. I didn't do science in climate before this EcoSupport work.
Right. Was it also in EcoSupport where you were studying the public perception of the climate change consequences?
Also it was our task, and it also was very interesting when we collected about 30 practitioners at the local city levels and asked them different questions, how they what they're doing with the climate, what they're thinking about climate change. Do they face with some questions or problem with today climate change or future climate projections? And it was really understandable that practically people who are doing with today running questions, they don't think about climate change so much. And the conclusion was we have to teach, not to teach, to work with them and to introduce them in these long-term perspective questions.
Okay,
thank you very much, Boris.
You. Anybody else? Anna-Stina.
Now it's on. Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to open or discuss this more like a chair of the monitoring and assessment group of HELCOM, which I have been acting for a few years. And I think that one of the very crucial outcomes for the monitoring and assessment work has been this setting the targets for the assessment. This is absolutely a task which you cannot do without a proper understanding of the ecosystem functioning and the processes, and without the very deep and wide knowledge of the Baltic Sea scientists, many of those being in the bonus projects as well. Personally, I was not involved in any of the previous bonus projects, but I think that definitely, for instance, the project BEAST that was already mentioned, I think that the output from BEAST to the setting of the core set targets for the contaminants has been absolutely crucial. As Monica already said, many of the scientists were in the expert groups. So this feedback between the national experts participating in the expert groups and at the same time being a top-level scientist in a high appreciated research projects is a very specific situation in the Baltic Sea, and I think we should foster that even further, because that's the way that we can really foster the best scientific available knowledge for making decisions. Although we are lacking behind, as Jesper said, but I think that the demonstration of the Target project, setting the targets and how that has helped the MONUS project has been very, very particular. I'm very pleased of that.
Yes, we take one more on these experiences. Mr.
I have
Andersen.
two comments, Maria.
Sure,
first,
please.
I want to take you a little bit down memory lane. A couple of years ago, it's more than a couple of years ago, there was actually an Interreg project started. It was called Balanced. And I really think you should acknowledge that this Balanced project has sort of set the agenda for a lot of the activities that has been taking place for many, many years within HELCOM in regard to the mapping of marine landscapes, in regard to the target setting, and all these indicator-based assessment tools are in fact born out of the Balance project, and the processes now leading to mapping of cumulative impacts was also born out of the Balance project. And whatever you are going to do in regard to marine spatial planning in the future, you will have to rely on a lot of the building blocks from the Balance project. So, and what I'm really trying to say is that it's so good that we have this very open way of communicating within the Baltic Sea between science and managers. So it really doesn't matter whether the funding comes from HELCOM-BONUS or an Interreg project or some national sources. There will always be a forum where we can meet and exchange ideas and result and use it for a higher purpose.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesper. But we have to continue to go forward in our discussion, and as already Maria mentioned and announced, we try to focus in the first part of our subject discussion. We talk about big pieces, big scenarios, big development perspectives of the Baltic Sea region. And if we for instance, think about the Baltic Sea region and think about all those big mega trends, like they were already mentioned, the climate, the globalization, including the markets and economy, and then the demography. And then we think relatively to the other regions of Europe. How, to your opinion, distinguished panel members, the prospects of the Baltic Sea would look in, let's say, 50 years or 40 years from now, or maybe even further forward? Please, who can start? Frederick, Wolf.
Yeah, we talk a lot about focus on research and things that happens in the Baltic Sea. But right. Some of the bonus projects also focused on the drainage basin. And climate change will not only affect the Baltic Sea, it will affect the drainage basin. And the projections in the future is that quite many studies show now, the future for agricultural production in the southern parts, central parts of Europe will be quite poor. but the climate change would actually means that we will get excellent conditions for agricultural production.
This is what I suspect, and what
and the net effect of that will be an increased demand of increased production.
Right, a pressure to our region to increase, intensify the. Yes.
And we have done scenarios, for example, to show that if Polish agriculture would be on the level of Germany and Denmark, I mean, the blue-green algal blooms we see today will be beautiful compared to the future. And so the climate aspects and also the drainage basin aspects of what's going to happen in the future is very, very important, not only what happens in the sea.
Right. So it's a very clear challenge also to the science. We have to understand how it will all work in future, climate situations. And any other reflections to this question? Andrzej Cieslak.
Well, continuing that, of course, you finally, anyway, ended in the sea. I would like to continue. The climate change issues, they are very popular thinking is about sea level rise, which is a very simple effect. But the much more important effect is the change of the chemical and physical parameters of water in Baltic. And this has not been taken up yet. While this will have a dramatic impact on, I suppose, kinds of jobs that are available there. And then there's, of course, it's even relative of the work we'll do to reduce the climate effect. But then the reduction of the climate effect means that some kinds of industry, that's energy, for instance, should move to the sea, especially the energy production. And there are also in the sea some resources which are still yet not properly investigated, which could be used, and we will have to somehow think about using them. So there's a lot of stress to be put on the Baltic, and there's at once a question, are we really properly and while thinking about the conservation targets that we are now placing before us with this imminent change which will which will happen. So we can't move back. But where's the stopping place?
Thank you. So apparently there will be changes due to climate change and threats related to many issues and a need for adaptation. I would like to give the floor now to Mrs. Heiskanen. You asked for the floor.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I think we heard a lot about the mega trends also that will take place concerning the need of new innovations, etc. And also about the, let's say, the biophysical changes of the Baltic Sea being warmer, and possibly because the processes interacting against the getting clearer, it might be that the warmer sea is getting even more eutrophied the more we try to do something to counteract that. But I think that Baltic Sea, what is the value of the Baltic Sea? What do we actually want? What do we actually get out of that? One of the use is fish. One of the uses we are using it as a sewage dump of the excess nutrients and toxicants. But I think that in the future, its value for the recreation and tourism will probably increase. Maybe this is something that we should really start to think. What is the value of the Baltic Sea, of the scenic species, of the environment in general for the tourism? If this is getting warmer, maybe there is more opportunities for tourists. At the same time, even if the world is getting more global, there is also a tendency to be more local, meaning that people want to consume local food and maybe even have their holidays in the local regions, because at the same time we also need to mitigate against the climate change. So getting more local and spending our holidays, despite the nice Mediterranean in the south, maybe even more in this region. So how do we actually make this region more tempting, more people deeply in love with the Baltic Sea, understanding the big value for the recreation that might be even increasing in the future. And it probably has a lot of job opportunities.
Excellent. So there are also opportunities. Mr. Hermans, you want to continue? I think you better just leave the mic as it is.
So
when you switch.
I would just like to rephrase the question in a way that how could we find targets that really tackle these megatrends and challenges for the future? And one good example was we just funded a research project on DARPA model. I guess most of you are aware of DARPA. It's a Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in the USA. And it's defense related, but they have been really kind of able to generate new innovations for decades. For instance, internet has been created in their project, and many other civil solutions. So one lesson that we learned was that the target has to be almost like mission impossible. And then if you let different technological platforms to compete to create the solution, then you will find kind of amazing outcome in most of the cases. And just one example, that 3 decades ago there was a program that was targeting to create invisible aircraft. And so now you can see the stealth bomber, which is invisible in radar, almost invisible inside, and so on. So this is just one kind of a challenge for us all, that how can we really generate strategy process, creating targets that are like DARPA's.
Do you have anything particular in mind in regard the Baltic Sea as an impossible target?
I think, usually what happens with DARPA context is that they have kind of a tools that they put experts in the same room and start collaborating. First they create context map, what are related to this topic or issue. And then they start making it more concrete and more concrete. And after 2 days you have something like, wow, this is what we need. So I cannot create the process on my own.
Reine, I remember a couple of years ago, Tekes, your organization, and BONUS, we organized a joint workshop on the ICT development perspectives here in the Baltic Sea region, and in relation to the problematics of BONUS, which is all about the Baltic Sea ecosystem services and goods. And then somebody came up with the idea, like those you mentioned, behind the horizon, something, creating what is called intelligent Baltic Sea, where all the information is sitting in the cloud and being able to channeled to everybody who needs it in real time, in any place, in a fishing boat or a sailing boat or a plane or monitoring office or wherever. Fredrik.
I think Ansti touched upon something very important. Of course, our research should be, and management should be, on restoring, stopping pollution, and so forth. But at the same time, I think we have to live with a eutrophied Baltic Sea for many decades. We will probably see a warmer, less salty sea. And how can we then channel this sea into a system which would produce useful products and services? I mean, could we channel more of the production into cod or salmon? Could we have a better fishery management? I mean, salmon fisheries today, I mean, you can earn 100 times more if you allow the salmons to go up to rivers and sport fishermen to catch them, for example. Sure. There are tourists opportunities and so forth. So I mean, let's also focus something of the reality we live in and the reality we're going to live in for many decades, and see how we can turn that into to something that humans will benefit from.
Maria, before we continue the panel discussion and reflections, apparently the question is interesting and challenging enough. Maybe there is any quick question or quick point from the audience at this moment. If not, then we continue with think about, please, about the active involvement in the discussion. Boris Chuborenko.
Yes, just to add a few words about the very important thing already mentioned. This is increasing of touristic activity on the Baltic Sea, especially local touristic activity. Coastal zone is very, very attractive to live on and much more attractive to have a rest. And from another point of view, we will have the level rise and different weather and the coastal erosion. So definitely for southern and eastern part of the Baltic Sea, the very much important will be the coastal erosions from one side, and from another side increasing of number of tourists who would like to have a rest on this eroded shore. So the efforts, scientifically based efforts in development of coastal infrastructure, on beach infrastructure, different types of management, because the question is transboundary. Sand could go from Poland to Russia, from Russia to Lithuania, from Lithuania to Latvia, and this is a long lithodynamic system which is connected with different part of this system is connected to each other, and very important to organize measures very well organized on the long line of the Baltic shore.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we take one more. Yes, please.
Just one remark, because I'm hearing a lot about tourism, development of tourism, and looking at it as for some, it seems as if it is a panacea for the unemployment problem and things like that, and it's not true. It can only reduce very slightly, and one has to remember that tourism is something which comes from rich societies. So if the society on the coast is not rich enough, and if there are not enough jobs within the region, then the tourism won't develop as much as we would like it to develop. So there's a very important question of proper employment in the area related to also the things which are happening here.
Okay, thank you. Well, now I think it is time to move to our ultimate theme, which is how the research can contribute. How should the future research look like in order to help us to move towards the prosperous region and the aims that we have for the Baltic Sea in terms of ecology? And you have brought up here climate change, you have brought up long-lasting eutrophication, you have brought up new possible methods for setting targets that are a little bit beyond the horizon as we see it now. But how should the research look like? Do you have anything in particular in mind that would assist us, for example, with these concerns related to climate change? Or
Rainer Hermans,
yes,
I think you reacted the first.
So I'm not a specialist in this specific field, so I start with a generic notion. What I expect is that research will be more and more multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. Yes. So in order to generate solutions for those specific targets, and it's really kind of exciting that we don't even know where the solution comes from. That it can, in smart water-related issues, it can come from chemical science, it can come from software programming, it can come from optics or anything. So I find the future really interesting but challenging. So we have to be able to take even high risks when funding these activities, because we are not aware beforehand that where the real solution really comes from, or what kind of combination generates it.
Right. May I give you, Arnoldas Milukas, you've been silent for quite some moment, but I believe the future science is exactly what you are thinking a lot in DG research.
Yes, and of course it's not only science, but innovation as well. And here, especially speaking about the environmental issues, most probably it's not only important, let's say, what technological advances we can achieve, but as well, what kind of a societal innovation we can encourage, because at the end everything depends on the society. Even when we speak about the sustainability, sustainability is not something that could be easily measured. We cannot take just let's say today's situation and say that we want to preserve the same situation for 100 years. It will never happen, because we speak about the living systems which develops. And speaking about the societal innovation, maybe as well we should look for some kind of synergies between technological innovation and societal innovation. As I mentioned that in my unit we have a sector which deals with Earth observation. So one of the, let's say, issues that we try to open now is to encourage so-called citizen observatories, where people, they can use their, let's say, smartphones, different devices they have, to monitor, to observe environment. They could, especially tourists. Anyway, they have very little to do, so it will be nice, let's say, if they could contribute some data to help monitoring environment they are in.
Right, thank you very much. Jesper Andersson.
Well, I am actually of the opinion that there will be a game changer emerging in 2, maybe 3 decades.
Game changer.
The game will be totally different in 20 or 30 years from now. Nutrients are resources, especially phosphorus.
Right.
And globally, projection says that we will run out of phosphorus in 24 to 30 years.
So it becomes expensive.
Yeah, and I will be dead and gone then. But my I foresee that we will simply, as society, we cannot afford to lose the nutrients into the Baltic Sea. We have to conserve or the nutrients in the production, in the agriculture.
What can science do there? Do you have any ideas?
Anna-Stina Heiskanen, you had something to add to this discussion.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking, my background, I'm a marine biologist or ecologist, so I started to think that yes, we need to know many of the societal responses and the questions in economy, etc. But there are still very many questions that are open in our understanding of the biogeochemical cycles, and especially the role of the organisms in there. And I think that there also we can find a bunch of very surprising things, as the past has shown. We have new tools, genetic tools available. Maybe we can discover something in relation of the new potentials for biotechnology. And on the other hand, we have to understand how the biodiversity is being regulated, what is the role of the genes, etc. So we have a lot of open questions. In the middle of that, combining the science, the natural sciences, and the societal economics and the welfare are the ecosystem services. So they are very good combining and linking these two disciplines together. We should use those for that purpose better in the future. So, and on the other end of that, where we want to increase the welfare, and how to do that, of course, we need to think about the targets, what is welfare, etc. But I think that also we have a lot of unknown in the societal responses and how the societal responses actually govern the possibility to do something for the environmental problems.
Absolutely.
So we should better understand the agent-based functioning of the human societies and our minds and our societal structures. How can we make those better to respond to the challenges, which are, of course, very multifaceted if we want to have a bluer Baltic Sea, or if we have to live with the green Baltic Sea also in the future. So both ways, going deeper into the science and deeper into the minds of the people.
Thank you very much, Anna-Stina Heiskanen, in particular for mentioning the marine genomics. I think this is something which will change how we do the science in the sea and around the sea very, very radically. But at this point, we would like to open once again, to make an opening for the audience. So could there be any quick statements or questions from the audience at this stage? Please, and please tell us who. Yes, of course. Yes, I know you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Andres. Wojciech Wawrzynski, International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. I have a question to Rainer Hermans specifically. In your presentation, you mentioned the multinationals and their ownership of intellectual property rights, of a huge chunk of it. So when I look at the bonus projects or at the European projects, I can see an increased participation of SMEs, but I don't really see any input from the large multinational enterprises. So my assumption is they use their own RTD units and they use their own scientists. And if that is so, what could be the way of increased collaboration between publicly funded research organizations and the large multinationals? I mean, they have their own tacit and protected knowledge, and the knowledge generated from public research is basically free to use, available because it's publicly funded. So if we would like to increase collaboration with the large multinationals, what do we have to offer to them? Thank you.
Thanks for the excellent question. We have an initiative which is called International Technology Bank. Instead of depositing money, large multinationals will deposit their technology packages there. And SMEs in participating countries can get an access to those technology packages. And what is different in this kind of open innovation scheme is that those technology packages can be already used and utilized by those companies, I mean large enterprises. Because we have some initiatives in Finland that we have piloted over the recent years, like Innovation Mill, where Nokia company has deposited their unused patents in the pool. And we have created 50 plus startups utilizing those technologies from the Nokia's patent pool. And many engineers that have been laid out from Nokia have started up their own company. So this is kind of an example but International Technology Bank is bigger than that. And it's not restricted to use only unused patents, but instead kind of technology packages that have bigger nature. And there are 6 forerunning multinationals who even have their own open innovation unit, who have really realized that they can serve small business community by this kind of service. For instance, just as a curiosity, there is an Intel company told that they have 20,000 questions regarding their technologies made by small and medium-sized enterprises annually, and they can respond maybe to 100 because it's not their business. So they outsource this kind of activity to a new concept of International Technology Bank.
Thank you very much. Markku Viitasalo, you had some.
I just wanted to add about this, public-private partnerships, because there are some public-private partnership already. I didn't mention in my presentation. I was kind of more at the public-public, like Article 185, but there are other called joint technology initiatives, and in ICT area, in transport, in medicine, where big industry participate as well.
Thank you. Markku.
Yeah, thanks for the interesting discussion, especially around the enterprises and collaboration. And we are just learning bit by bit, doing policy-relevant research, I think, in the marine research, and BONUS has been a very good promoter for that. And now the issue of collaborating with enterprises is coming up, and that's another issue completely. Enterprises as such are not different collaborators than universities if they have a knowledge that is needed in the research. So my question is, are there any other benefits that, especially regarding the policy relevance, that we could gain from collaborating with enterprises? And perhaps Arnoldas Milukas could comment on that from the DG research side.
Thank you for the question. So,
there is no distinction made between, let's say, participants, either they come from the industry or from academia in, let's say, in the collaborative part of the program, maybe with some exception that sometimes there are special provisions or eligibility criteria for small and medium enterprises. But of course, to be in general, what Commission is trying to do as well, and already happened for the past years, is to help to organize industry, European at least industry, through the different technology platforms. And as well, sometimes, as I mentioned before, those through these technology platforms, even just joint technology initiatives have been developed. Okay. I don't know if I responded fully to your question, or there was some.
I think we are okay, and we will take now the next question from the audience. Can you present yourself?
Yes, my name is Katarzyna Kamińska. I'm from the Fisheries Department in Poland, but I'm also the chair of HELCOM Habitat Group. And in my work, many times I face problems with conflicts between usage of marine resources and protection of nature. Do you have some ideas how we can cope with conflicts which will rise in the future, especially with growing demand for marine space and also for usage of different resources? And this is a question to Andrzej Cieślak, but also if other people have some suggestions, I would be very happy. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the nice question.
Once again, our suggestion is to keep the mics on all the time.
Okay, it works now. Well, that's a big question, of course. One of the things to do is to do proper spatial planning as a tool for management. I would like to say at once that spatial planning is not a panaceum. It's just a tool which solves spatial issues. But anyway, this means that it has to be based on proper science, proper knowledge. And, well, this is my hobby, also my work. But with this question, I would say that to do the spatial planning in a proper way, there's quite a set of scientific questions to be asked in a way useful for spatial planning. And useful for spatial planning means that the thing has to have a spatial dimension. It has to be placed in space. It has to be placed in time. It has to have values, or at least indications of values. Otherwise, it cannot be put into a spatial law, which is the spatial plan. And for instance, there are these very pending questions. What is the meaning of connectivity, ecological connectivity in the sea? Because you would expect the spatial planners to propose some kind of blue corridors, or, well, biological corridors in the sea, but what is a biological corridor in the sea? How do you arrange it? Then spatial planning is about the future. And in fact, science is also about the future. It's just recording, which is what says what we have now. In true science, I have been doing science for 35 years, by the way, also, is about the future. So what is the change in the sea we will expect? The biological, ecological change in the sea, and therefore what will it result in? What kind of change in jobs, conservation targets? And then about optimum, these are some of the questions which might require answering before I could answer properly your question.
Okay, but thank you for that reply. And actually, I would like to now take one more question, a little bit different question before we start wrapping up, if that's okay.
I think we can afford still, as we said in the beginning, we are sorry for looking into this from time to time. 10 minutes, we can go forward.
To communication and the channeling of the scientific results, both into the society, the decision making, but then on the other hand to this business use, commercial usages, etc. Is the system as it is it good, or could we improve? Yes, Mr. Hermans.
We could learn, for instance, from the OECD. They have excellent policy briefs where they kind of they just briefly mention the outcome of a piece of research and put it in the political context. That was really the policy implications for enterprises, for political decision makers. And we have tried to imitate recently their views and their example at TEKES, for instance. And because we have really found that helpful to disseminate the research results and communicate them wider.
Okay, policy implications to be communicated. Mrs. Heiskanen.
Yeah, well, when listening to this discussion, I think that we don't really, as a scientist or marine researchers, we don't have sufficiently opportunities to meet with the SMEs and industries. So that could be something to think about. How can the scientists, how can these, how do you link those two branches together, and that might lead into something. That could be something to foster.
Right. Boris Chubarenko.
Yes, maybe just immediate answer on your suggestion. You know that every 2 years the Baltic scientific community has a big forum, which called now Baltic Sea Science Congress. And nearest congress will be in Klaipėda in August, at the end of August. I think such kind of meetings would be very nice to meet not only scientists but also representatives of any stakeholders levels. For example, here in this room I calculated through the mailing list that we have more than 25 scientists and nearly the same people who could be considered as customers of our knowledge, of our advisors. I think we have to shift this somehow, this proportion. But for me, this proportion is also very good. I am among those scientists who really believe that our knowledge will help somebody, and we could advise something.
Thank you very much, Boris. And the Baltic BONUS is actually one of the co-organizers of the Baltic Sea Science Congresses. The next one will be held in August in Lithuania, I believe, and I can disclose a secret that we are organizing a little young scientist training there about dissemination, about engaging the broad public. But the question I want to, before we start thinking of wrapping up this very interesting discussion, I've been, as a program manager of BONUS, I've been thinking much about the discrepancy of clocks. You know, the science, the academic life goes in one pace, and then the policy and even more the commercial life goes absolutely a different pace. We need, in a program like BONUS, we need 1 or 2 years to identify the research priorities, far-looking research priorities, and then we open a call with specific topics, and then it takes a year to select the projects, which will be 3 or 4 years. So So how many altogether? After 6-7 years, you can expect the result, the yield, this is certainly not the time circle on which nowadays policy and entrepreneurship works. So how to synchronize the clocks? Could there, among the panelists or among the audience, could there be any bright ideas of this sort?
I'm sorry, maybe this idea is not bright and it is not new. You know this joke, that sewage joke. If you would like to have a good water, the best solution is a dilution. This is one joke, and another, not jokes, but fact that ocean water is very well saturated by oxygen and everything. So maybe the one of way of thinking, starting from science till the economy, will be the backward Nord Stream. Taking water from the ocean and putting in the middle of the Baltic Sea to...
Okay, you are talking about geoengineering. I think some voices are rather cautious about those.
And I think maybe in 10 years we could reach this level.
Any other reflections? Yeah, but my question was more general about the science methodology or methodology of securing the usefulness of science. Anna-Stina.
Yeah, I just immediately started to think more experience from my previous life. I was involved in the implementation of the Water Framework Directive in their early phase of that. And their science was really very useful for many, many parts. I mean, those of you who have been involved probably know that. But it was also, I think that it was the research projects that were on the European level that were supporting the implementation had some opportunities also to shift their planning in such a way that when meeting the national governors, national experts, managers, and discussing of the programs, you could actually adjust your deliverable better to follow the needs of the managers. Right. But of course, this was requiring a willingness both from the scientific community to think of the end product. Where is my research going to be used? And on the other hand, the manager to commute clearly what kind of products they would like to have. But that also requires flexibility of the research program, that your targets are not completely fixed, but you can get feedback from the managers, and the managers can get outputs from the scientists all around that program cycle. And on the other hand, the policy cycle is also cyclic nowadays, so it's iterative. So the fruits you can also foster later in the process.
This is in fact pretty much how we work in the HELCOM gear group for the implementation of the ecosystem approach, where we consider the implementation cycle of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and think about the assessment needs, for example, related to it. But now I think it's already almost 20 past.
I cordially wish, Maria, I'm so sorry, but in spite of all the time limits, I'm cordially wish to give floor to my old friend Frederick Wolf.
Well, besides being a scientist, I'm sitting in a foundation which actually fund studies of the Baltic Sea, particular how should you solve restore the Baltic Sea. And that foundation recently gave 100 million Swedish kronor to a research center, particularly for synthesis and communication, because I think the stakeholders, the other people outside our world, is unsatisfied with how we present our results in a way that it makes sense to the rest of the society. And there are a number of issues where you actually can synthesize the information in the say that you can actually say, if you do this, that will happen. If you do that, it will happen. And it's fundamentally a political decision. Could we have coastal fisheries and seals at the same time, for example? And yeah, I see my friend here. I mean, there is a number of these issues where it's high time to have a political decision about how to handle these things. So of course, more science is needed in many places, but it's an enormous lack of synthesis and giving managers and politicians the options and then select one of those. Sometimes I feel science can be an excuse for not taking actions.
Okay. Now one very last closing comment, but you have maximum half a minute. Please, Mr. Hermans.
Okay, thank you. In medical science and biotechnology, they talk about use-inspired basic research. So all the pharmaceutical companies are extremely interested in the results of use-inspired basic research, because what it means is that simply that they don't know biological mechanisms behind some phenomenon, and that's why it's basic research. But they know what is the target of research, for instance, treating cancer or something. So this could be related to concrete targets in this context. That I'm pretty sure that IBM or some other big companies that already have some smart water applications and technologies, they would be extremely interested if we can formulate concrete targets and conduct and start some kind of use-inspired basic research projects.
Okay, use-inspired basic research project. I think we have an analogy in the Baltic Sea in terms of that we still need certain basic features even to be resolved in order to be on a cost-efficient side of actions, for example. But now we start wrapping up, and I think we have had a very good discussion here, and it flowed all the way from looking at future scenarios. In particular, you had points regarding climate change, how the chemistry, physics of the water will change, agriculture will be more prevalent up north compared to south. And also there will be more pressure for sea space usage in the future. Tourism will be more prevalent in the Baltic Sea region. There were also points made regarding the target setting for science, that we should be really ambitious, look beyond the horizon to the other side, and also use methods from other organizations and even countries. There was also a point made that it is so exciting in science that we don't know where the solutions come from. And that partly has a link to that you very much stressed multidisciplinarity in science, that we should really aim at combining different research fields when driving research projects. Public-private partnerships you emphasized, and also there was this very interesting idea of technology banks as a way for the SMEs to enter the arena in a better way. And also there was an idea of some shift from policy-relevant science to business-relevant science, and for communication and channeling of scientific results to be done in such a way that also the business communities will be increasingly involved. Yeah. Perhaps you have something to add.
Maria, thank you very much for the excellent wrap-up and summarizing. Actually, the discussion, the panel discussion also kind of ended up with this plea for more summarizing the research results and summarizing them in real time, while maybe even before the project is technically over. And we in BONUS program, we're trying at least to do it. Of course, you can't be entirely flexible when you announce the requirements, the terms of reference for the competition for the research projects. But we are asking our applicants to reserve a little of their resources to be able to do this synthesis work, and not only alone within the frames of the individual projects, but also within the thematical clusters of the projects. I understand that our time is now finally up and up and up, and thank you very much. I believe this is an absolutely unique situation, that in one European macro region we have a very strong environmental policy making and management system, which is Helsinki Commission, and in the same time we have macro-regional research governance network in the same area, which is BONUS. Thank you very much.
And very much thank you to the panelists who actively took part in the discussion. Thank you.
Yes.